someone was interested in how we met.
I had never heard of Rachel for some strange reason. Can you imagine?
When you asked me, it was such a no-brainer. It was one of those, I don't know if I need to pray about this because I feel like this is God opening a door.
When we marry, we don't single out an individual. If the person you're marrying carries certain things or pays allegiance to certain things that may not be healthy for the union, then that's something to keep an eye on. When we conflict, let's try as much as possible to resolve the issue.
Yeah.
And I encourage as much as possible not to drag in relatives yet. Despite all the economic hardships, provision is the easiest in parenting. The brain, the logical mind, reasoning develops slowly. When we are teaching them logic, but they are operating on emotions. Now, when we bring some of the things that we are teaching them, we have to be very careful that their little brains can comprehend them.
Yes. Hello and welcome back to Reality Check. We are thankful that you keep coming back week in, week out to join us for these conversations on mental health in the areas of marriage, relationships, parenting, the workplace, and just you as the awesome individual that you are. So welcome aboard. If you're new here, consider subscribing. If you are a regular, welcome back. My name is Rachel Mwine. I'm your host. And today I'm joined by Dr. Eva Satwine, looking radiant in black and white.
Thank you.
And she's the founder of International Center for Mental Health and Family Care. Today we are going to be answering some of your questions or comments that you typically leave us underneath the videos that we have been airing, at least for the past maybe 1 or 2 months. And I really love that you guys have so much to say when we do bring out our conversations, because this is not just about us. I don't believe we have all the answers. And so it's really nice to hear what your thoughts are and then follow-up questions. So think of this as a follow-up question or an Ask Us Anything segment. Welcome aboard. Welcome, Dr. Eva.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
So we've done this before. We have answered questions from our YouTube comment section. And so today we wanted to do that again. So to start us off, Dr. Eva, I wanted to start on a light note. Someone was interested in how we met. She's called Alison Karunji. She left a comment under our in-laws conversation. And she says, thank you, Dr. Evas and Rachel, for this wisdom. I have a question, though. How did you two meet? It feels like divine connection. The both of you being in a room itself is a lesson. So I want you to tell your version, then I'll tell my version. How we met.
Very heartwarming. Yeah. And she has answered it. Divine connection.
Yeah.
I'll share honestly that when reality check started, it didn't start as reality check. It started under ICFC. I don't know what, and then later on when we started, we came up with a plan to have it as a full-fledged YouTube channel. We needed a host because before I was doing solo.
Yes.
Yeah, but then we needed a host. Yeah. And I reached out to someone and they said, would you recommend a host? I really need a host and I don't know where to begin from. And this was a TV personality. And then she said, give me a few seconds. I'll recommend 2 people. She sent in 2 names. I had never heard of Rachel for some strange reason. Can you imagine?
You'd never heard of me? Imagine, I've known you all this long, but you never said that.
Can you imagine?
What?
And she said, she gave me 2 names. And when I got them, I prayed over them. I said, God, these 2 names, show me exactly who, because you know why we are doing this ministry. And we need someone who will connect with our purpose. We need to be on the same page. And I had tried, of course, I've cut the story short, but I had tried some people and I said, no, I need to ask. So when I got those 2 names and I prayed over them, I called the first number.
Which wasn't my number.
Which wasn't your number. It didn't go through.
Oh, wow.
No, it went through and the person didn't pick.
She didn't answer.
She didn't answer. Then I called you. So I called Rachel, and the rest is history.
The rest is history.
Because I remember when I reached her, I said, Rachel, we are doing this and this. And I say, I would love to do that.
Yeah.
Yes. So
my answer was immediate, and I'll say why. I think I'd been in a place in my life where I was asking myself, like, what am I about? Like, what's my identity? What's my purpose? What am I doing? And one of the areas that I feel like God has called me to is the area of family and marriage, and just to lend wisdom from my own experience. And so when you asked me, it was such a no-brainer. It was one of those, I don't know if I need to pray about this because I feel like this is God opening a door. And yeah, like you said, the rest is history. And just to mention the importance of purpose and your purpose aligning. And I feel like when you do get an understanding of what you're supposed to be doing, then when the opportunities come, you will be able to tell which one is for you and which one isn't. So yeah, that's how we met.
And we thank God we're doing this together.
We do.
Yeah.
From the conversation we had on religious differences in marriage and relationships and if it matters. And this comment was from someone called Akanjuka. And I think he or she, I'm going to assume, says, does an equally yoked apply to a partner's family? Maybe for some context, our guest that day alluded to that scripture that talks about believers being, unequally yoked with non-believers. And so she's asking, does an equally yoked apply to a partner's family? Like the guy is Christian, the lady is also a new convert, but her family is Muslim. The guy's family refuses marriage preparations on the grounds that the other family is Muslim and they cannot be unequally yoked with them. So if the man and lady are Christian, but one of their families is not Christian, is that being unequally yoked?
Okay, so I'll start it off by emphasizing that when we marry, we don't single out an individual. We all belong to a structure. We all belong to a system. We are part of the bigger system. And so that's part of my answer. So whoever is asking, they have to check because we are all shaped by systems around us. And so if the person you're marrying carries certain things or pays allegiance to certain things that may not be healthy for the union, then that's something to keep an eye on.
Yes.
You know, please note that we don't really impose decisions on people, but we give guidance on certain things. So it's very important that you don't just say, oh, you know, us now we have started our own thing and we are here. There is something that has shaped us. And from time to time, especially when the waters settle after we have gotten married, then you really see someone really roll back into some of the practices or belief systems. And I remember on that show, I mentioned that our belief systems are the most important thing in marriage because belief system shapes our values. And so how do you see this? How do you look at the whole picture rather than now I'm here, now the other one is here? Just pay attention. Make sure you don't get dismissive on some of these things, but you contextualize everything. Having said that, I know at a certain point we all depart from certain things and we shape our own destinies. And so, again, this is a matter of wisdom. If the couple has made a decision and they have said, we have now shaped our own, we're starting our own journey of believers and we are going this direction, still, it's important to know that the other systems I talked about will still have a need, because you see they are protesting. They are saying you can't have a wedding, we cannot give our daughter to. But please check again the influence. However, you may. I mean, some people can have their journey and they start and they have now gotten roots into a different area. Maybe that can happen, but it's also very important not to disregard the influence of the systems that have shaped us. I hope that's helpful.
I feel like it does.
Yeah.
I feel like it does. One of the things that you said that stood out for me, I think, is exercising wisdom and then looking at it as like a big picture, having a big picture perspective to know that eventually, yes, we are going to set our own path, but then don't disregard what your family's reservations are, and then exercise wisdom in how you proceed.
Yeah.
Okay, so still under that episode, the one where we discussed in-laws and navigating that relationship, Drusilla Henry asks a question, and she says, I personally told my husband to never report me to his family when I do something wrong or when we argue, because we forgive each other after a little while and move on, but his family will always remember that bad thing about me, and yet my husband has moved on. So she's not really asking a question, it's a comment, which I would want for you to
very
speak
important,
to,
yes.
that the whole idea of covering your spouse, especially when it comes to your in-laws, understanding this, that for them, they're not obligated to forgive you, and so maybe what would you tell couples?
What I would tell couples, exactly that, and she has really articulated it well, that when we conflict, let's try as much as possible to resolve the issue.
Yeah.
I mentioned in one of our episodes that you may not be able to resolve the issue. And I encourage as much as possible not to drag in relatives yet, because there will always be conflict of interest. And yes, if we have them as support system, but even then, check who is likely. Because not every in-law is going to help.
Yes.
And I'm sure people have seen that. When we are getting married, people just mention on weddings, you've heard states, we'll be there for you. But when the rubber
hits the
road, it's a totally different story. And by the way, let me say this. It's not that some of them are willing to, but some of them don't know what to say. Because some of them may not be able to carry your weight genuinely. They don't know how to resolve certain issues. Probably they struggle with their own values. Probably they do this. So it doesn't mean that because they are an in-law, they have something to offer. That I must emphasize that. That's how some marriages have been messed up. So you run to your sister and they say, how can you harass my sister? They will not be objective.
That's true.
That's even in therapy, Rachel. Can I tell you what? In therapy, we are also obligated not to counsel the people that are relatives to us.
Oh.
Yes. Because I'm going to be conflicted.
That's
I have
true.
only one brain.
Yeah.
So if I look at my brother and I don't have the nerve to be really objective, I'm likely to mess things up.
That's true.
So as much as possible, we try and say, okay, can you talk to another therapist?
Yeah.
So just imagine for in-laws, So what happens is that when we run to in-laws, we pour out all this anger and frustration and we say so many things. For them, they receive them. They feel bad for you, and they, as much as possible, they want to help you. Now, when you roll back and you're able to solve issues, you forgive each other, you're gracious. For them, they are likely to take that raw story
and form an opinion about you.
And however much you come back and say, my husband is amazing. Oh, my dear wife. They go
but he said ABCD.
They go like, what do you mean?
What do you mean?
So they may not be able to process it. That's why, I mean, and when your spouse is repenting to you and all, they're not going to repent to the whole village.
No.
You see, they are not going to. And they will not have that opportunity. They may not be able to. So it's very, very important that then we are very careful not to just quickly take raw emotions to our relatives. And then later on, when we backtrack and they are working out our issues, then we are stuck. Then we feel we need to clarify issues later on. Then now it becomes second level confusion. So it's very important that we operate in wisdom. I can never overemphasize the importance of wisdom on matters of marriage management. And can I also say that when we are young in marriage, we run to every relative, we run to every person who said they will help. We run, and it is okay. Maybe you've already made that mistake and all, it's okay. But going forward, just don't. That's why we encourage, please seek professional help. Because you see, if you run to someone, you can get, we call it social support system, but it's not professional. Now, and I'm sure some people who have talked to a relative or two, they've, at a certain point, the relative says, I think you need to speak to a counselor. And it is okay. It's okay. So they can offer emotional first aid, but then later on, you need to still talk to a professional therapist. But as much as possible, it's important to protect our spouse. It's called fighting smart. When you fight smart, I think there's a story about some group in this country. When they are full, they burn granaries. When they fight, they cut each other, and then the following day they are going to hospital. So the thing is, you shouldn't do that every time you have a disagreement. So you manage conflict in such a way that with a sense that you might not need to live together again, but then tomorrow you're living together. So that's why emotional reaction has to be managed very well so that you don't have so much damage later on to control.
I really like that. I mean, having the end in mind, even in your emotional state, is very important.
100%. That's called emotional intelligence. So emotional regulation is important. So even under, so much heat of the moment, you need to consider that there is tomorrow.
That's true.
So why we make so many mistakes, tell so many people, tell everyone how this guy, how you even ended up with them, or this woman, damn, or what. Don't do that. Calm down, and it's a matter of the mind. Emotional regulation is one of the best skills
that you can never have.
That one can never have.
Because people have lost opportunities, have lost relationships.
They have.
Because of a failure to manage or regulate their emotions.
100%. And they've made statements they cannot retrieve.
That's true.
And so it's very, very important. It's by the way, it's a matter of the brain. The moment you order it in such a way to know that every time there seems to be an emergency, there's going to be tomorrow.
That's true.
So you don't need to really tear yourself up, and you need to calm down, take a few deep breaths, take 10 deep breaths. I advise people, just breathe. Just sit down and breathe and open your brain to knowing that there is going to be tomorrow. And so that helps with the in-laws and not running to them every time we have a raw situation, and then the following day you need to retrieve it. You can't retrieve it.
As in just the mess. I'm just thinking about how you go to your in-laws, tell them about your wife or tell them about your husband. And, we have a lot of grace in our relationships as married couples. You are going to forgive this person, and so after you've forgiven them and moved on, Now your relative is stuck with this information.
They are stuck, and you're not going to get it out.
No, you're not.
Yeah, they're going to form opinions. They're going to treat your partner based on what you have told them. In fact, when they see you gracious, they're going to try and win you back into the original shape and say, "Look at you now."
They're taking advantage of you.
You see that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's very important to operate in wisdom.
True. Okay, we'll move on. We did a show on being your child's best friend, parenting conversation, and there were a couple of comments there that I felt like we should respond to.
Sure.
There's one here from someone called @verydark1988. People have interesting names on YouTube. But this person says we should also speak to children who struggle with trying to connect with parents who have no interest or capability in connecting with their child beyond provision and societal expectations. As a child, is it okay to give up? That's a loaded one.
Yeah, so as a child, is it okay to give up? It's not okay to give up, but it happens.
Yeah.
So I was running a parenting session for one of the banks this morning, and I was telling staff that provision is actually, despite all the economic hardships, provision is the easiest in parenting. Yeah. Wow. Provision, material provision, fees, food, that one is we can get it. But in terms of nurturing and training a child and connecting with them,
that's hard.
And being warm and creating time for them and creating and allowing them to express themselves, and listening to them. And that is the hardest. But apparently, that's the area where we nurture a healthy child. It's not in taking them to school for another person to teach them. That training, when we all check, it only prepares for a little bit. It trains us to go and look for jobs and do them. But in terms of life management, this whole human being has not been nurtured to live, you see. So the things that we are supposed to teach, that the discipline, the connection, the care, the emotional regulation we've just been talking about, all these things, this is training a child to be a human being. So nurturing the human element of the child, that's where someone wants to connect. And then also to emphasize the fact that the number one need for a child is to connect with the parent, right? It's not to get fees.
That's true.
Yeah. These are there, but it's not that. You see, it's not to just get fees and then we tell them, oh, do you know how hard I'm working and I've taken you to an international school. That's not what they are interested in. If you want to check this, there is a eulogy, that is trusted when children are talking about their parents. Sorry, I'm using that. It is called CV eulogy, and then there is a real eulogy that people give, that children, when they are talking about parents. Please pay attention, all of us who are listening. When you listen to children talk about a parent, they don't talk about provision.
Rarely.
Yeah. They talk about the care, the how we played with them, the how he loved us, he connected with us, the seemingly simple, but very powerful things, the little names they called us, the grace they extended when we fell. That's where life is. And so when a child is trying to connect with a parent, to get grace, to get understanding, to feel loved, to get warmth, to the care, the all, then, and a parent is not available. Yeah? A parent is not available. By the way, I was just sharing this morning that you can still sleep home. sleep home from Monday through Sunday and still be a neglectful parent.
It's possible.
There is a parenting style we call neglectful, uninvolved. So that child is actually talking about an uninvolved parent. This parent can pay fees, can do what, but they are not involved in the life of a child. You know, things that communicate love and care for a child are totally different. Some of the things like a parent showing up on important days at school.
Yeah.
That a child will say, "Thank you, Daddy, for coming." You know, "Thank you for coming. Oh, this is my teacher." And this is something like knowing your child's teacher. I was challenging parents this morning. I asked them, how many of you know at least one teacher of your child? That is important because you see, things we do and how people interpret them. Children interpret that as love. The things they interpret as love is money they don't understand. Because like the money we pay is so much that it can't fit in our little children's brains. But then they interpret you came for our assembly. When they are playing, they are seeing you. They are dancing because they are seeing you.
Wow.
You see, that's powerful. They perceive that as high level love. You know, when you go out with them and you leave everything else, they say, "Oh, Daddy loves us." Can you imagine we went out to play? When they are talking to you and you put your phone down,
wow,
and you listen to them, then they perceive that as love, as care. So what that child is talking about, or what that person, the child will push because they cannot punish the parent. They can't get the phone and throw it away. They cannot do all that. So what they do is that they'll keep coming and say, "Mommy, I wanted to." Then you keep on phone. You're like, then they'll see that they just... They keep withering away. You know, they want to talk to you, you're yelling. You see, listening to them respectfully and answering graciously, they perceive that as love. So when they come to talk to you and then they perceive you as, Daddy yells or Mommy yells, Mommy never listens. So for someone to ask, is it okay to give up? I'm answering your question.
Yes.
I don't have to give them permission to give up. They're just going to give up. Children just give up on us. They look at us, they're like, so Mommy, you're going again. Okay. You know?
They stop asking. They're not interested anymore.
You're not interested. So they say, Mommy or Daddy hates us because they have no time for us. Children interpret time, both quantity and quality time, as love. So when all this is not gotten, they get helpless because they cannot punish the parent. They cannot. So what do? They just give up.
Wow.
Yeah, they just give up. Wow. So they just... So you'll say, "Oh, do you want me to..." They go...
Whatever rocks your boat, you know?
Yeah. So the giving up, they don't need permission. They'll just... It happens naturally.
Which would really be sad. And I think as parents who are watching this show, like, try and create meaningful connection with your children beyond provision and, you know, providing accommodation and school fees for your children. Which brings me to my next question, still under the same episode, brought in by somebody called Inspired by Natifu. She asks, is it possible to have a session that unpacks what a good connection looks like for the unborn child and their mother and father? She says this will benefit expecting parents.
Okay. Connection, I remember I mentioned at some point that connection begins on the inside. There is so much life on the inside. Yeah, there's so much psychology, which I promise that we'll do that session.
Yes.
Yeah, but for starters, to say that there is so much connection on the inside. First of all, the peace that we have when you're peaceful. Remember, this child is feeding off you.
Yes, true.
Right? They're not just getting food through that tube. I've forgotten the technical word, but
With the umbilical cord.
Umbilical
Yes.
cord. Can you imagine? So they're not just getting food from the umbilical cord. They are also peeking into the emotional structure. That emotional infrastructure of the parent, a child feeds off it. So, for instance, when we are freaked out, when there is so much conflict, there is a lot of science that shows that a child's brain development gets affected. They freak out just from inside. So when there is so much peace, I'm sure parents know, moms especially who have been pregnant, when there is so much, when you're at peace, the baby is playing on the inside
kicking,
and all that kicking and all that. There is a lot of science around that, but we connect with the child. And I'm sure that person wants to hear that, speaking to the child, singing and all that. That's very important because we are spirit beings. So when we do that, we are feeding the child on a whole big menu. And so it is okay to do that. But the most important thing is to say that emotional stability, peace and calm and wellness, and that's very important. It's not enough to just eat a good meal, which a child gets nutrients through the umbilical cord. Now that I know,
You remember
I remember, but also through that emotional setup, that emotional state of the mom is so very important. And again, the relationship, I mentioned that when a dad touches the tummy and all that, there's a lot of science that we can...
the unborn child.
Yes, engages the unborn child and communicates so much joy and peace. So that is very, very important for us to know that we need to have those good relationships so that we can get a baby that is healthy right from inside.
From inside.
Yeah.
That's so true. I think we underestimate our mental well-being when we are expecting. I think even things as little as just complaining all the time or, just being unhappy. And I know being pregnant can be a very tumultuous time because hormones are all over the place. But I think practicing gratitude, practicing just being in a peaceful, calm environment and being grateful for what you're about to receive, even though it is difficult. Maybe you're throwing up, you're experiencing nausea, whatever. And then I think the relationship between you and the father of your child, ensuring that it is always at its best, I think.
It is very, very important. And Rachel just remembered something like moms or parents who reject a child when they are still on the inside. Maybe you've been told you're expecting a gender that you didn't want and all. That rejection gets communicated.
This is true.
Yeah, so the mom is always crying, the statements you're making. Once again, I remind people that we are psychological beings, and so we need to pay attention to a life beyond physical. And so some of the things we say, we do, they communicate something to our spirit and our soul. And this can connect with people within us or around us. So.
Okay, one last one for today comes in from Joanna Nakato, still on the same episode. I realized there were quite a number of questions. And she says, at what age does or should a parent start to have serious talks with a child? My 4-year-old and 6-year-old boys, goodness, my hubby sits them down and wants them to do things as old teenagers, and I feel it frustrates the boys. Is this right? So she didn't give any specifics, but she asks, what's that age of expecting too much in a child? So I guess what are age-appropriate conversations to have, for example, with a 4-year-old, 6-year-old versus a 10, 11, 12, 12-year-old boy?
Okay, so first of all, that's a question that we need to shape a whole lot of conversation on, because all parents, almost every parent asks, when should I tell the child this, when should I? Especially, I don't know, this person wasn't very specific, but most likely it's about conversations about sex and sex education and all that. And this usually confuses all of us. I'll be vulnerable here. Let me share an experience. When I was a young mom, I I attended a school meeting, and they had gotten a counselor to come. Was it a counselor or some random person? They got them to talk to us about teaching children. But this person told us, go talk to your children about sex. And our little children were in P1, so they were about 6. And I came all ready to talk to them about sex and sexuality. And I just poured out all these raw things on them.
You did?
I did. I did. I wasn't a psychologist. I wasn't anything.
Okay.
And we had just been, you people, the world is ending. We have to be very careful about some of these.
The world was ending.
The world was ending. It's been ending since. And we were all stirred up to talk to children about sex and sexuality. And I sat my little tuntus down to talk to them about sex. But then I'm talking to them. Now, what I say to them, this is funny. So I told them, I said, you people, sex is for married people.
Okay.
I mean, like, I think I said so many crazy things.
Yeah.
But then I mentioned that. So one of them looked at me and said, what's that?
What is that?
What's that? And then she said, sex. So, Mommy, you're married, right? I said, yes. I said, so you mean you have sex?
Oh.
So I got stuck.
Yeah, you were not ready.
I wasn't ready. And then I looked at her and I said, no. And then she said, but I was going to hate you.
Oh my goodness.
You see that? So why I shared this, I got stuck, and then maybe I should share this. So a couple of years later, they of course they are growing. They are seeing so many other things. Now they are growing. We kept the conversation. I learned the hard way. Yeah. Now I had to retrieve certain things. They couldn't be backtrack. But then later on, they studied. They were, I don't remember which class, I think P4, P5, they studied bees and reproduction. Then they talked about which bee, queen bee, and I don't know, king bee or whatever, and how they reproduce. Then they came and said, hey, now we get it. Hey, so maybe you're queen bee.
You're queen bee. Wow.
But why I'm saying this is that we confuse children. We come with all the raw things. And one of the reasons is that we are not connected to our children to see how much they know, how we need to take them, and basic things. Let me speak as a psychologist here. Children, as young, I mean, when we are growing up, we are all operating on emotional mind. And then we develop the brain, the logical mind, reasoning, develops slowly, and it develops at a rate at which we activate it, And so most of the time they are not operating on logic. So when we are teaching them logic, but they are operating on emotions. They feel. Yeah. Now, when we bring some of the things that we are teaching them, we have to be very careful that their little brains can comprehend them.
That's true.
So when we bring this whole information, we are saying, oh, do you know homosexuality? They don't understand big concepts. So we need to break things down, teach values, and say, this is what it is. You're not supposed to do this. Like basic things they can comprehend. One of the things we teach children is to map their private space, right? So you don't say, don't start having boys. You teach them to map their private space. So you teach them if they are young, you teach them, you say, anything that belongs to, just stretch your hands like this. Anything here is private. And no one, you don't allow any person to touch it. Then you talk to them, who bathes you? Now, because who bathes you has implications on who sees you, who touches you, who does this. Now, so you don't allow any other person to enter this space. The gate should be closed. You see? So there is a way we teach children when they are young. Then when they start growing up, we are teaching them based on how their body is developing, how... have you seen this? Don't do this. Then there is this. And then we continue. So you can't bring the conversation you're supposed to have with teenagers about hormones and how their hormones are raging and how the body is shaping and the identity crisis. And then you bring it to a 6-year-old. They don't understand it. You know, there's the sense of sexuality amongst teenagers is different. With these little children who are still riding a bike, concerned about this, don't overwhelm. The principle is don't overwhelm a child with information they are not able to process. Having said that, Rachel, our children are exposed to so much. They know so much.
That's true.
And the world has been so sexualized that now children are exposed to so much information. And so what I would tell parents is please be in step with your child. Just keep understanding what they are exposed to. Check in.
Yeah.
Joshua will kill me. but I'll tell you. Our son recently came last week and said, Mommy, a girl is vibing me.
Ooh.
He's only 10.
Wow.
You see?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Now, you can't hide your face again and say,
no,
oh, you know, this
that.
is a very young child.
Yes.
So I had to have a conversation with him on that. What does that mean? What happened? How did she vibe you? And then he tells me and he says, oh, you know, look at this little note they wrote to me. And these young boys are getting notes and whatever, both boys and girls.
Sure.
So we need to connect with our children, get to know what they are exposed to, encourage them to talk to us. When they are able to share, in their innocence, they are going to open up and say, oh, do you know this person was telling me this? And then we don't have a curriculum for a parent, a manual to train the child on this. You're going to have to connect with your child, hear what they know, use that as a teaching point, a learning point, and say, let's talk about that. What does that mean? Oh, this person said I'm not as beautiful as they are. Oh, really? Let's talk about that. Pull out some of you who are Christians, pull out Psalms 139, verse 14, and say, but you're also fearfully and wonderfully created. One of the things we taught our children when they were young was to keep their lane. You don't have to be like any other person. God is a God of diversity. So he created you to be one of your kind. And so you need to enjoy your own beauty. You don't have to be like another person. So every time they said, I'm not like another. Oh, they said I'm not as... no, you don't have to be as. You are you. So those are some of the things we need to do. Connect with children, hear what they know, and hear their concerns, and teach them. Turn everything into a teaching or learning point.
That's true. I like that. Would you say that approach also applies to things like if the parents are going through a divorce, if there's been, say, a death in the family and maybe children don't really understand like what is death, especially for the children below 4 years, experiences in the family that are going to alter their lives for the rest of their lives. Would you say the same approach applies?
100%. And of course, for life-altering events, we also have to be honest enough to say even the parents are struggling.
That's true.
Right? For instance, divorce. Parents are already struggling. Their emotional makeup is just upside down. And they also need help. Now, sometimes they are struggling, they can't help the child. or they actually transfer the struggle to the children. One of the things I had forgotten now that I remember is to say, please, that's why we have resources like child psychologists to help children. Please connect with a child psychologist.
Yeah.
If you're struggling with certain things, there are certain things you're not able to do. Some of us grew up not having conversations about certain things. You know, they were taboos. And so now you're here, and all you're saying is, as we didn't talk about it, didn't I make it? You didn't make it. You're still struggling as a parent. Utilize those resources. But coming back to your question on life-altering events, we need to be intentional. For instance, death of a loved one.
Yeah.
If a parent is not able to answer certain questions, that's a time to connect with a therapist. But it's very important not to assume that our children are okay because we are covering them.
That's true.
No, they're going to struggle. And so we need to be intentional about having conversation. There's power in conversation. There's so much power in conversation. It's good for emotional cleansing. It's very important for perspective shaping. And so it's very important that parents are intentional about engaging children. First of all, to know their struggle, to understand their struggle, to be able to process it. Does it make sense? Do they have what we call cognitive distortions? There are certain distortions. For instance, when parents are separating, the number one thing a child says, I'm the problem. Right?
Yes.
So how do you correct that? So you need to connect with the child and say, you're not the problem. Adults conflict, they don't agree, and this has nothing to do with you. You see? So otherwise, if you don't, they'll go with that and think I'm the problem, my parents hate me, that's why they have separated or something. So general response to your question is, let's be intentional about engaging children. Let's understand what they are going through. Let's understand their little minds. Let's connect with their little minds and try to give them some bit of response. Let's comfort them so that we don't just make assumptions that because they are under our cover, they are okay.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for that. Any final words to our audience, especially for the fact that they trust us with their feedback? What would you say as we close?
No, first of all, to appreciate that people come through. It's so... One of the reasons we started this was so we could have a space where certain conversations could happen. I've been telling people that sometimes some of the conversations we've engaged in, it feels like trading where the angels have feared. And I remember one time we were planning a conversation on in-laws, this recent one we had, and then someone asked me, do you have to talk about that as well?
Wow.
And I've just seen the feedback that has come out from it.
Yeah.
This is an issue. So I just want to appreciate our audience so much for coming out to give us feedback. And please keep it coming. Keep it coming. Because the reason we are here is that we can facilitate a conversation and not because we are perfect or anything, but that even we can share our imperfection with everyone. And so please keep that feedback coming and feel free to be as vulnerable as possible. And if you want to share your experience, I think, Rachel, we should say that. Please feel free to reach out, and our contacts are there. We really appreciate that we can have a society where these conversations happen.
Yeah.
I really want to emphasize once again, there is power in conversation.
I agree.
There is so much power in conversation.
I agree. Well, I won't belabor the thanks, but we really do appreciate your feedback. Just to emphasize that if you have a story, an experience you want to share with us, many times we have these conversations and we're thinking, this would be great if someone were bold enough to share their own experience. And I know many people can relate, many people can resonate, but because they are afraid, they would rather just stay in the shadows and receive this information, which is good. So if you have an experience, please reach out to us on anything related to marriage, your mental health, life as a single person, whatever it is that you think would be relevant to this channel. We would love to have you.
Men and their experiences with dating. We've always talked about women.
Yes, men and their experiences with dating. Would want to hear what your thoughts are on that. And so if you're out there and you're bold enough to come and share, you have no idea how many lives you will touch. So take that step. That's it from us. We'll be back again next week with another conversation right here on Reality Check. May I remind you, please subscribe to our channel. And thank you to everyone who got us to 10,000 subscribers.
Yes.
We appreciate you so much.
In less than a year.
Yes, in less than a year. Thank you. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.